You open the fridge, you stare at it for a few seconds, then you close it and order food on your phone instead. This happens almost every day. You don't think about it. But the real answer to how you got here is far stranger than you'd guess. For most of human history, there was no fridge, there was no menu, there was no guarantee of dinner at all. And yet your ancestors survived, they thrived, they spread across every continent on Earth. Not because they farmed, farming is new, almost embarrassingly new. What they actually ate before agriculture is not what you were taught in school. It is not caveman steaks around a fire every night. It is something far more complicated, far more fragile, and far more brilliant. Start with the word itself, paleolithic. It sounds intimidating. It just means old Stone Age. It decodes to this, the long stretch of time, roughly 2.5 million years before anyone planted a seed on purpose. For almost all of that time, humans and their ancestors were what researchers call hunter-gatherers. Two jobs: hunt animals, gather everything else. But which job mattered more? Here is where the popular picture breaks. You've probably imagined a group of men throwing spears at mammoths while the rest of the tribe waits by the fire. Dramatic, cinematic, mostly wrong. Anthropologist Richard Lee studied a hunter-gatherer group called the Zhuangzi in the Kalahari Desert in the 1960s. He tracked exactly what they ate over months of field work. Meat showed up. But it wasn't the backbone of their diet. Roughly 2/3 of their calories came from plants, nuts, roots, berries, melons, leafy greens. Gathering, done mostly by women, quietly fed the group more reliably than hunting ever did. Why does this matter to you? Because it rewrites the whole story. Hunting is exciting. Hunting is unpredictable. A hunt can fail for days, weeks even. Gathering doesn't stop working just because the antelope ran the other way. The plant world doesn't get away. But here's the part that should really surprise you. This diet wasn't the same everywhere. Ancient humans didn't eat one thing. They ate whatever the land in front of them offered, and the land changed constantly. Think about that for a second. No two humans 10,000 miles apart ate the same breakfast. One group near the coast pulled shellfish out of tide pools. Another group on the savanna dug for tubers with sharpened sticks. Another group in colder climates ate almost entirely animal fat and meat, because plants simply didn't grow there for most of the year. Humans didn't have a diet. They had thousands of diets, one for every place they learned to survive. This flexibility is honestly the real superpower, not fire, not tools, flexibility. Consider the Inuit, who for generations lived almost entirely on seal, whale, and fish, with barely any plant food at all. Their bodies adapted. Genetic research led by scientists including Rasmus Nielsen found specific gene variants in Inuit populations tied to processing extremely high fat intake, changes that appear to have been shaped by generations of an almost all-animal diet. Meanwhile, a hunter-gatherer group in the tropics might eat mostly fruit, tubers, and insects, almost no large meat at all. Same species, wildly different food, both worked. So what does ancient human diet even mean, if it means something different depending on where you stand? It means this: your ancestors were not eating a fixed menu, they were eating a set of skills, the skill of noticing which plants were safe, the skill of tracking which animals were nearby, the skill of remembering season after season where the food would return. That last part deserves a pause: memory. Ancient humans had to remember across an entire year where the fig tree fruited in spring, where the tubers hid underground in the dry season, where migrating herds would pass through in autumn. This wasn't survival by luck. It was survival by an enormous shared oral map passed down for generations of when and where the world gave up food and insects. Let's not skip this. Insects were and still are in many cultures a completely normal source of protein. Termites, grubs, grasshoppers, ants, high in protein, often high in fat, and far easier to catch than a running animal. Entomologist and researcher Marcel Dicke, who has spent years studying edible insects, has pointed out that insects were almost certainly a steady, reliable part of the diet for early humans, filling gaps that meat and plants couldn't always fill on their own. You might feel a small flinch reading that. That flinch itself is worth noticing. Why does a food source that fed your ancestors for millions of years now feel repulsive to you? That question leads somewhere important because it's not really about insects. It's about how quickly what feels normal to eat can shift. Culture decides disgust. Biology just decides what will keep you alive. Now here's the twist that changes everything you just pictured. This diet, this varied, flexible, wide-ranging diet, wasn't reliably abundant. It was often scarce. Anthropologist Marshall Solins wrote about hunter-gatherers using a phrase that still surprises people: the original affluent society. Not because they had more, because they wanted less, and their wants were usually met. Some groups worked only a few hours a day gathering food, not because food was easy, because their needs were small, and the land, when treated carefully and moved across seasonally, provided. But scarcity was always one bad season away: a drought, a cold snap, a migration route that shifted unexpectedly. When the food didn't come, there was no stockpile, no granary, no fridge. This constant low hum of uncertainty shaped human biology in ways you still carry today. Here's where the modern mirror gets uncomfortable. Your body still runs on ancient software. It craves fat and sugar intensely because for nearly all of human history, fat and sugar were rare and valuable, worth craving, worth stockpiling in your own body the moment you found them. Ripe fruit was a jackpot. Animal fat was a jackpot. Your ancestors who craved these things intensely and ate them when they appeared survived better than the ones who didn't. Now flip to today. That same craving circuitry, tuned over millions of years for scarcity, is sitting inside a world with a drive-through on every corner. The instinct hasn't changed. The environment around it has changed completely. That is why willpower alone often loses to a candy aisle. You're not weak, you're ancient. There's something else worth sitting with. Ancient humans didn't eat alone. Food was almost always shared, distributed, negotiated within a group. Anthropologist Kristen Hawkes, studying groups like the Hadza in Tanzania, found that successful hunters often shared meat widely across the camp, even with people who hadn't hunted that day. It wasn't pure generosity. It built trust. It built alliances. It meant that when your hunt failed next week, someone would share with you. Food, in other words, wasn't just fuel. It was social glue holding groups together through unpredictable seasons. Every shared meal was a quiet insurance policy against future hunger. So picture it now, correctly this time. Not a lone caveman with a club. A tightly connected group, moving with the seasons, mapping the land in their heads, sharing what they found, eating plants far more often than meat, adapting their entire diet to whatever place they happened to be standing on, sometimes feasting, often uncertain, always flexible. Then, roughly 12,000 years ago, something shifted. Groups in a handful of regions started staying in one place, planting seeds on purpose, waiting for them to grow. Agriculture arrived, and with it something ancient. Humans had never really experienced a food supply tied to a single spot, a single set of crops, a single point of failure. It's tempting to think agriculture was an obvious upgrade. The evidence says otherwise. Skeletal remains from early farming communities often show more signs of malnutrition, not less, compared to the hunter-gatherers who came before them. A diet built around one or two staple crops, wheat, rice, maize, delivered fewer nutrients than the wildly varied plant and animal diet it replaced. Farming gave humans more calories, more predictably, in one place. It did not necessarily give them a better diet. That trade-off, more food, less variety, is one your body is arguably still negotiating today every time you reach for something processed and convenient instead of something wild and varied. Which brings you back to that fridge, full of food from a dozen different places, grown by people you'll never meet, available at any hour, requiring no memory of when the tubers ripen or where the herd is passing through this month. It is an extraordinary luxury. Your ancestors would have found it almost unbelievable. But the cravings inside you, the pull toward fat, toward sugar, toward foods with a big caloric payoff, those didn't come from the fridge. They came from millions of years standing in front of something far less certain, learning generation after generation exactly what the land would give if you paid close enough attention. You open the fridge again tomorrow, it will still be full. But now you know what's really standing behind that decision. Not a menu, not a single ancient diet, but an entire inherited memory of scarcity, flexibility, and the long patient skill of finding food in a world that never promised any.